will always be ageless. I'm the type of dude that will always feel shameless. I'm the type of dude that they say is fucking heinous, cause I'm the type of dude that you know is fucking dangerous.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Nerd Talk, where we find out what makes you nerdy. And today I have a special guest, James Falcon. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, just like the bird.
Alright, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. So, can you tell us about
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. But we all have our early years and everything, and I was just curious, so where did you grow up around the Nashville and Knoxville area, or did you grow up somewhere else?
I actually grew up in Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay. Now, did you go to film school around there, or did you go somewhere else to learn?
I actually flew across the pond to the National Academy of Film and Television out of London, England. Actually, Buckinghamshire, England, to be precise.
That's really cool. And this might be a weird question, but as an American, is there anything different that they taught you over there in England than they would taught you over here in the States, you think?
A little bit. When I went to film school, film theory was the school is not big on practicum, so you don't shoot a lot of stuff. You spend a lot of time studying the masters, guys like Hitchcock and Roman Polanski, and studying their films, what they meant, what this person was thinking when he directed this shot versus that shot. So, but the British style of filmmaking is very, very different than the American style of filmmaking.
Well, I heard your favorite film was Pulp Fiction. Can you, after all these years, can you explain something about that film that, drew you into, the world of cinema?
Well, it's funny. I went to Boston College and got a degree in economics. And I was working for a bank and decided to take a long lunch and went to go see a movie. I went to go see Pulp Fiction. And the second after that movie ended, I knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew that's what I was destined to do. For me, it was the dialogue more than anything else, because the way he writes that dialogue was the way people talk, and it wasn't very hooty or structured. It was very free flowing, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer and a director.
Is that how you approach writing? Is that how you try to approach writing when you write your own scripts?
Very much so, yeah. I definitely try to make sure that, that the dialogue is king in a film. To me, if you write good dialogue, you're going to have an engaging film. And so guys like, Tarantino and Kevin Smith, those guys write some of the most beautiful dialogue around. And to me, at least the way I see it, you can't go, that when it sounds like you and your friends are talking, you get engrossed in this film. You feel like you're in the film itself.
Well, I feel like it makes the friendships and the relationships, if there are any in the films, a lot stronger, because you feel a connection to these people you wouldn't. Like old school movie stars, they're like, I love you, baby, I love you too, and you're like, oh, just freaking kiss already. We know you want to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for me, when I approach a script, I want to make sure that the dialogue is natural. It doesn't come off forced, or it doesn't feel like somebody wrote it for the actor. I want the actors to come across it as something unique and like everyday language, everyday talk. To me, that's what makes a film.
I've always had a weird approach to the storytelling that I do, because I'm still relatively young and I'm still trying to get my voice across and everything. But every time I wrote a character, I always told people, the guy who I was getting to act the part, I said, look, I want you to act this way, but I want you to say these words. And they always looked at me and said, why do you want me to say this line in particular? Because I could say this in another way. And I'm like, well, the way I look at it is, everything you say is something you believe. As ridiculous as that sounds, everything you say is something you believe in some kind of a manner. The way you carry yourself tells me a lot about your personality, though. If you, for example, I said the character he was playing was like a character with his hands in his pockets a lot. I said, I want you to look like you're really shifty all the time. I want you to feel like you're shifty, but you're still a good-natured person when you're reading off your dialogue.
Yeah.
And so when I'm watching,
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying that when I see like a Tarantino film, I feel like that he has like a similar approach to that, and that's why I'm always drawn to his movies in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, especially with Tarantino and even Kevin Smith in that same realm, um, they write this engrossing, amazing dialogue, and that's, to me, that's how a character becomes more relatable. At least that's how it comes across to me. I can get past the blood and guts of a Tarantino movie, and I can kind of get around the actors or the characters not doing much in the Kevin Smith movie other than talking, but I get ensnared in that film when I listen to that dialogue, and how natural it comes out of the actor's mouth is to me, is just simply amazing.
Now, the one thing I did check on your websites and everything, like there's 2 different names for your production company. I just want to make sure I get the right one, because when I clicked on the links you gave me, one of them was for the Birds of Prey, and I went to your YouTube channel and it was listing a different website. Was there something going on with that, or what is the main one you want people to get attracted to your stuff?
The main one is Bird of Prey Productions. The Over the Line Films is actually one that I started with a good friend of mine who lives in Murfreesboro. We don't do much off of that one. He's not in the film industry as much anymore as he was when we first started. So Bird of Prey is probably the Bird of Prey is the current one right now.
Okay, I just didn't want. I wanted to basically give everybody a link to your stuff so they could see more of it and everything. But I didn't want people to be linked to the wrong thing and everything. Now, we're all film people, and I always feel like every film person is deep down an artist, and but we also like other stuff. Is there anything in particular like you found that you find fascinating, like reading a book or playing some music? Like, what do you have like a creative interest that is outside of the video and film realm?
For me, reading books. Obviously, I love reading a good book. Actually, it's funny. My wife is an author. She writes women's literature, women's lit. So I love reading books. Video games, especially your story-based video games. I'm a huge video game nerd. So like Red Dead Redemption and LA Noire are 2 of my favorites. Among Us is another one that I'll sit and play for hours on end, just because I love that story-driven aspect of the video game. I'm not big on the first-person shooters or anything like that, because to me, they just don't have, it's kind of a cookie-cutter storyline in single-player mode. Of course, I'm a huge hockey nerd, so I love playing NHL as well.
I'm guessing that that's something you and Kevin Smith have in common, is being a hockey nerd.
Yes, absolutely. I grew up watching Boston Bruins when I was a kid, and I love my Red Sox, and I love my Patriots, and I love my Celtics, but I always will be a Boston Bruins fanatic ahead of all those other teams.
Didn't mention that your wife is into writing and everything, but is there anything that you read? Have you read your wife's works and you're like, hey honey, can I turn this into something? She goes, I want someone else to touch that, or something like that.
No, we've talked about working together and adapting one of her books, which is called A Whisper of Smoke. We've talked about doing that possibly, but we're actually we've written one script together, and we're in the midst of plotting out another script. So it's interesting, her coming from the book world, me coming from the film world, how we can combine our ideas. And she paints very beautiful pictures when you read her book, as opposed to me, where it's just, I could care less about scene description, but I'll take forever to write dialogue, because I want to make sure it sounds good.
It's so weird, because like you were talking about studying film theory in college and everything. That was one class I had to take from my major and everything as well. But the one thing that I always think is funny is like when you're theorizing a book, you can read the book, and as much the scriptures as that person wants to possibly put into that book, they can put it in there. But when you're watching a film and you have to describe what that scene means to you, there's no words being spoken, but you have to sit there and basically fill out 3 pages like would be in a novel or some type of book about how that scene would play out. And it's just fascinating to see that translation difference between film and book a lot of times, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, when I'm writing a script solo and I'm not, I'll hand it off to my wife, and she'll add in, hey, I think you need to really work on this description and kind of paint it out, because, what happens if I don't direct this film? I write as if I'm going to direct, so sometimes my wife has to kind of rein me in and say, hey, maybe this isn't one that you direct, but how would you describe the scene? And kind of grounds me down a little bit more. She loves my dialogue, but she wants to make sure that, I'm encapsulating everything, so the scene itself speaks for itself as well.
Yeah, because like she said, if you're not on your own project, you have the vision in your head, so you're like, oh, I know exactly what that's going to be. And your wife's like, hey, buddy, not everybody who reads this has your eyes. We need to make sure they know what you're saying and everything. And one problem I have is not that, but I always write way too fast, so I always miss like a couple words. So when I'm writing it, like my first script in particular was about like a guy who was dealing like with a manifestation of death. And so when I put it in the script, I was like, the cop examined the body and he said the child has died. Like, that's what I was writing in my head. But when I put it on the paper and it turned it into my professor, she was reading it and she was like, the guy dead? I was like, yeah, he dead. She's like, your Southern's showing. I'm like, I know. You don't have to tell me. But that's always been a fun thing for me, is at least, and like you said, trying to at least instill down your vision of what you see to someone else, because I know we have a million miles of thought going through our heads about how we want something to be picture perfect, but when we're trying to write it for someone else, we can't describe it exactly as how we see it, and it makes it such a difficult process. I've only been in the film industry for, I'm going to say 3 years out of school, but I've been trying to do this since I was in middle school. Can you tell me how long you've been going at this?
I've been working as a filmmaker for over 15 years. I primarily worked as a first AD. I took some advice from a good friend of mine who said, film directors don't work all the time. You may not get a project for a couple of years. He goes, but a first ADs work all the time. And so one of the first things I did was I started shadowing the ADs. I started shadowing a second AD and started shadowing the first AD and kind of getting an idea. And when you do that and see how a set is run, it changes your perspective as a filmmaker. Now I'm on the other side. I'm behind the camera shooting. I've been the DP for a few years now, and I'm a lot more efficient as a DP, only because I've sat and watched how a film set is run. I've run my own film sets, so I know every minute counts. Every second counts. Because every second is $1. It's got a monetary unit to it with the budget. So you have to make sure that you're shooting as efficient as possible. So, you end your day when you're supposed to, and start your day when you're supposed to, and come in on budget, for that specific day. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you telling me all that, because like I said, I'm still coming into the business, as it were, and everything, and I'm trying to get my foot in the door as best as possible. But as everybody knows, this year's been like the best, trying to be the yes year to try to do that.
Yeah, it was not a smart year for people that try to be a filmmaker. I've been lucky, I do editing jobs on the side. That's kind of my side hustle. When I'm not working on a film. I was lucky this year. We had a film that a good friend of mine, I worked on a Christian TV show with him called Bloom Today. And he had a movie that he was going to shoot in August, September. And obviously with COVID and that pandemic happening, we had to push it back to late October, early November. But I jumped on that production and we shot a really great movie in about 3.5, 4 weeks.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad everything worked out for you guys and everything, because, like I said, I'm trying to get my foot in the door and get everything rolling so I can make my own projects, basically, and everything. So
yeah, COVID has changed the industry. It's movie theaters are closing or they're not in business, and that really changes your landscape of how a film is going to get distributed. Now, with especially with coronavirus, and who knows when the majority of the population will get the vaccine when it's available. It may be another 5-6 months before the majority gets inoculated from this pandemic. So in the meantime, content is still king, and the streaming services are sovereign countries. They are buying content left and right. And so it's going to take people going out and just making movies, to do it. The advice I can give to any person out there that wants to be a filmmaker is, you have a camera on your phone, and now most of them are shooting in 4K. For $20 you can download the Filmic app and go out and make a movie, write a quick screenplay and make a movie. That's the best advice I can give to anyone is you have the ability to create content, get out there and do it. Because if you're not doing it, someone else is going to.
Well, again, thank you for all the advice. That is wonderful advice, especially for someone like me, and especially for everybody else who's still like in college and everything, struggling to think, well, how am I going to do anything? And I'm like, with this advice, I'm like, well, we got somebody who says you can do it, and we're going to try to do it as best we can possibly can. There was a guy years and years ago out in England who with a $50 Sony camera went out and did a zombie movie called Colin and got into the Cannes Film Festival. So you don't need $1,000 cameras, you don't need $1,000 lights. You might want to definitely do something decent with audio, because obviously if you can't hear it, you can't enjoy it. Yeah.
But go out there and make a movie, make connections. That's I did a lot of PA stuff and worked for free on a lot of indie films before I got my big shot. Because you just got to get your foot in the door, and once you get it in there and you make those connections, and you work, your work ethic is hard, and you keep your nose to the grindstone, people are going to notice that. And when they notice that, next, a project comes up, you just never know. You might get, that guy that you're PAing for that's a camera op may have, a couple $1,000 and wants to make a movie and is going to call you to pay you to do it. So that's kind of what happened with me. And I was PAing for a guy who was the director of photography. I was PAing for him, and running lenses, running cards, grabbing film stock. And, he said, hey, I got a movie coming up soon. I'd love for you to be on it. And, he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I'll be your first AD. And sure enough, that was my first paying job. Right out of the bucket was being a first AD on his independent film.
That's really cool. Like I said, that's a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing it with me today and telling
of course.
everybody like that. Now, this is getting more into like the creative side of things, but how you're very much a scriptwriter, it sounds like. But is there anything like visually, like within the camera, or some type of trick that you just say, "I love to do this every time"? And if someone's like, "Oh, if I'm watching you, that's what I notice for. That's what I look for."
I love doing continuous shots where people come in and out of the line of sight of the camera. In my short film Lemon, I was the DP on Lemon, which we did for the 40-hour film festival, and we had a shot from the outside looking inside the house, and I had the shadow that looked kind of like a bush, and then all of a sudden it moves, and it's our villain. And those are the type of shots I like to get. I like to get those shots where you're not really expecting to see anything, and then all of a sudden there's movement, or you see a character walking in and out of frame. That's a key character. To me, that's always been my calling card.
I did watch that one on your YouTube channel, and it was really good and everything. I will tell you that one. That one's really good. What I saw on your stuff.
Yeah, we had a blast doing it. 48 hours to make a movie is no joke.
Yeah.
You're up for that 48 hours doing it, and it is hellacious. And yeah, we were all pretty punch drunk by the end of it. Once we turned it in, I think I slept for like 12 hours.
I bet. For anybody who doesn't know, the 48-hour challenge is basically you have 48 hours to film, shoot, write, cast, do whatever you need to. It is no hard bars. Get the shit done. Filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like, it is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
I've only done one, and I think, like I said, I was still in college when it happened. And for the 48 hours, like I said, it was for something weird, but it was like, hey, we need you to create like a campaign video and everything. And so I had nobody that was willing to help me at the time, because they were like, dudes, I got work, and I was like, I gotta do something. So I was like, I know. And so I just went to my random stick figure program online, downloaded it right quickly, and animated as crudely as I could a stick figure animation of a campaign poster or something like that, like a campaign video. And I turned it into them, and they thought I was the parent of the person who made it, because they're like, oh, this is made by such a wonderful child. Can we meet the child who made this? because of how crude it was. And I'm like, you're talking to that child.
That's awesome.
Because of how crude it was. But yeah, I can't even remember what the competition was, but I know it was like one of those 48-hour challenge videos, because my teacher saw it and she thought, oh, that's so precious. And I'm like, yeah, that was made by me. But now this one I'm gonna now this might be a weird question to ask, but is there any piece of me, and like you talked about like your favorite film, you like to read and everything, you like to play video games sometimes, but is there any piece of advice or like piece of work that you always go back to for inspiration? I know you said you like Pulp Fiction, but is there anything like every time I'm like in a hard place, I need to figure something out, I always go back to that, back to the well, as I call it?
Well, when I'm writing a script, depending on what the script is, I'll come up with a playlist of movies that I want to watch, either while I'm writing or that I want to watch beforehand. So me and my wife wrote a suspense thriller, and so I watched like Blue Ruin, and I watched Kill Bill, and came up with this list of movies that I wanted to watch that were dark, and Black Swan was another one, and kind of get into that tempo and that mood and that feel, getting into that mindset that you need to get into when you're writing or when I'm filming. Depending on what I'm shooting, I shot a couple years ago. I shot a Civil War movie with a good friend of mine, Danny Ramsey, called Soldier's Joy. I was the DP for that, and so I watched a whole bunch of war films. I watched Glory, and I watched the Magnificent Seven, and Dances with Wolves, and watched a ton of these war movies so I could get into that mindset of when I have to shoot one of the big battles, I have that. I have a reference point, and I kind of know how I want to shoot it, but it gives me more inspiration, to go ahead and say, ooh, I liked how they shot that. I'm going to go ahead and shoot it this way and see how it turns out. So,
yeah. Well, whenever I bring that up, one of my friends that was back in college, and I asked him like a similar question, he goes, well, I don't want people to know exactly what I'm shooting. And I go, well, dude, if you like something, why not just embrace it? And he goes, oh, no, I don't want people to say I'm a copycat. I'm like, you're not going to be a copycat if you admit what you like. That'll just make people go, I wonder what that is, and everything. If they're not...
The best advice I ever heard from Kevin Smith was, good artists copy, great artists steal. And, when I'm shooting, I always go back to, how would Tarantino shoot this? How does Roger Deakins, who's an amazing cinematographer, what is he going to do with the camera? Great artists steal from everybody. I steal a lot from John Carpenter because, he's one of the directors that influenced me when I was a kid, watching, The Thing and Halloween and The Fog and, some of his great films that he did. Was so influential when I was a child. I still to this day steal from him.
Oh, thank you for that. Is there anything in particular that you want to talk about before we close out the podcast?
No, just the only advice I can give to people is, especially for aspiring filmmakers, is like I said before. You have a camera on your phone. Point it at something, hit record, and make content. You may not, you may never get into a theater, but you have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, you have Apple TV, you have these amazing platforms that are buying content left and right, and there's always an audience for your stuff. You may get 10 people. You may get 9 that just don't like your work, but you got one person who's going to be like, wow, that is awesome. And, to me, that's, I watch a lot of indie film, and I know a lot of indie directors and a lot of independent producers. And, I consume movies like a person consumes food. And, you got to go out there and do it. You can't hem and haw and say, oh, I need, $1 million to make this film. Absolutely not. We did Soldier's Joy for less than $1,000. It's a 2.5-hour movie that we shot over 2 years. And, we had almost no budget whatsoever. Everything was donated time-wise. We're in talks right now getting it on Tubi TV and getting it on a couple of other different platforms. So it's out there. If you have an idea, grab your phone, grab a couple of your friends and just make a movie.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, James, for talking with me today, and I hope to hear from you sometime in the future.
Yeah, thanks for letting me. Yeah.
Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know, if you liked the video, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please comment down below as well. And also subscribe, because we need the subscribes here. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll catch y'all in my next video. Alright, bye.